Hello fellow CNCnutz and welcome. Today we're going to start putting the hardware onto the bike, and hopefully by the end of it we'll have that back wheel turning. So the first thing I need to do is I need to install this gear here onto my wheel. If only it was that easy. We start by putting a split rubber washer on the inside of the hub and the unsplit washer on the outside. The metal gear goes on the outside. This metal gear has got holes for 9 bolts to go through, and we attach that on the inside to 2 half-moon metal plates. This helps spread the load evenly across our spokes. You'll find that the bolts will just drop in between each of the sets of spokes. Once they're all in place, we tighten them up. I've added an extra washer on the outside. There's a spring washer supplied, and the nuts that go on the back of it are capture nuts, such that they will not undo by themselves. I've tightened them down until the spring washers have just flattened off a little bit. I can still see there's a gap in between the rubbers here, and I think just for the time being that's how I'd like to leave it. I don't want to risk damaging the spokes, and I want to make sure that this thing still spins true, which thankfully it does, so I haven't damaged the spokes in any way. We'll see how that goes. We can always tighten it up later. It'll be easy enough to do when it's on the bike, and move on with the next part of the install. Now the next piece to assemble is the motor onto this plate here. They come with 2 washers, a spring washer and a nut, which I've already removed. I'm going to leave 1 washer in place, and then this goes on here. It won't go back to front. The holes will not line up if you try and put it around the wrong way. So there we go. I'll put a washer, spring washer and a nut. And there's the motor plate complete. Well, it was about here that things started going pear-shaped. As you can see, the wheel's running nice and true, the gear runs beautifully, and the chain runs nicely on it. The plate is a nice fit to go onto the body there, but here's where the problem is. You can see here that the chain is horribly misaligned with the pinion on the motor. In fact, it's actually touching the body of the bike. Fortunately, I have a solution to the problem. So one of my plans was, if it wouldn't fit into this area here, I'd try and mount it vertical up the bike, and with a basic clamp around here I can attach it and ride it like that. All I want to do at this stage is to give it a try and see how it runs. I could, if I wanted, make a special plate to go in here to bring the gear into the right place, but this is a far easier solution. So this is the final solution I came up with for mounting the motor to the wheel and onto the bike. I made that plywood piece on the CNC machine. It had the 2 half rounds on it. Now I did that on the CNC machine because the 2 half rounds had to be at a specific angle so that this would all match up properly. And the easiest way of doing that was on the CNC machine. Now, the piece I made, the plywood piece, was a blank, so that I could then clamp it, work out how long to cut it, and where to drill the holes in it. A lot easier to do that manually than it was to try and figure it out and get it machined on the CNC. I would never have got it right. So that's all that made. If I want to now, I can take those measurements and create myself a new one, but there's nothing wrong with that. The motor is now really solid on there. It's not going to go anywhere. All I need to do now is get the rest of the hardware in place. I need to do the handlebars next, get the speed control and the brakes fitted, and then I need to work out exactly where I'm going to put the control unit. I removed the rubber handlebar grip from the handlebar, and I've slid my brake and gear change controls along. Now the idea was to mount this here. This has the battery level indicator and a switch under here, which I believe just a push button, when you push it, shows the battery level. And it also has this here, it's the thumb control to control the speed of the bike. And it simply slides on there like that, but this is where I've run into a trouble. Unfortunately, the thumb control is fouling on the gear changes. Now these gear changes are for the rear derailleur, and I need them, and there is just no way these two are going to go together. Even if I space them apart so that they don't foul on one another, it's still not going to be practical. It's just not going to work for me. So I need to come up with another plan. And what I've decided to do is I'm going to take this here and put it over this side here. Of course it'll foul on these gear changes here, but I don't use these ones here a lot. These ones of course are for the gears that are at the pedal end of the bike. By removing that, it also will give me room to mount at least one of these two brake levers that came with the kit. Now what's special about these brake levers is that they have this wire built into them. There's a switch in here, and what that does is when you pull the brake, it actually tells the controller that you're braking, and it shuts power off to the motor. So by moving the thumb control over to this side here, removing this brake and gear change assembly, I killed two birds with one stone. I get to put this here on as well as my thumb control, and I don't need to worry about the gear change here. So that's not really a good start today. I've already pulled apart the wrong half of the handlebars. With the speed and battery indicator mounted and the new brake lever, I now need to make some decisions. Now at the moment I've left the old gear change for the front derailleur sitting here. I'll sort that out later. I haven't yet cut off the extra brake lever with the switch, because I'm thinking if I can get another speed change here for the rear derailleur, I might be able to use this, so I'll hold off cutting that free for the moment. Now the cables for the brakes only reach as far as here, and they need to plug into the control unit here that controls the motor speed. So I need to make some decisions, and what I found is when I was looking in the box, I found this here. It's actually an extension cable which will allow me to extend this cable further back, and that works out really good because the obvious place to mount this here is at the rear, close to the motor as possible. That way all the high current stuff has cables that are as short as possible. So I want to put the battery down in this area here. The wires from the motor will reach into this area here as well. Thanks to this extension cable, this will reach for the brakes, and the cable that came with the speed and battery indicator is also nice and long, will reach down to this area here. So clearly that's the best place to put it. What I need to work on now, well, I'm finally making more progress on this. It mightn't look like it, but it is. Thanks to my brother who lent me this bike stand, which has made it a bit easier to do this. He's managed to find me a replacement shifter for the rear derailleur, which means I can now use the brake with the switch on it. So now I've got both brakes with electric switches on them to cut the motor should I apply the brakes. Now to get rid of that plug that I had here with the extension cable, what I do is I cut it off and cut the plug off the extension cable as well, and then just twisted and soldered the wires together, put them in heat shrink, and then I put this other heat shrink over the top. Now this heat shrink is impregnated with a hot glue type substance, so when it shrinks down, the glue also comes out the end, and the whole thing is encapsulated and is weatherproof, so that's going to solve any issue there. In fact, the biggest problem with this build has actually been the battery box. So I started looking at this battery box immediately after purchasing the kit, because I knew, of course, the first thing I'd want to do is try it out, and I can't do that if I can't keep the batteries on the bike. Problem is, 4 weeks have now passed and I haven't made any progress on it at all. My first attempt at making a box to go in this frame here failed miserably. You only need to add a very small amount of wood in here and these batteries will no longer fit. I've now come up with a solution, and I'm going to show you how that goes together in the next episode. Needless to say, this piece here is curved to go around this bottom rail here. It's the same technique I used for making this piece here. So I'll be showing you how that's done. Now there's just one thing left to do. This here is going to sit in here when it's done as well, so all the wires and everything will fit in the box here. And I think we should celebrate by powering it up and see if it works. Well, with the batteries connected, if I push the speed control there, nothing happens. And that's because of this switch on the bottom of the battery indicator here. It actually turns on, or at least enables, the control unit down here. When I push the button, on comes the LEDs to show me how much power there is left in the batteries. And now when I use the thumb control, the motor will start turning. And there it is running at full speed. As you can hear, it's pretty quiet, so that's quite good. And the variable speed control is actually quite nice. You can almost set whatever speed you want. Now, I put a speedo on this earlier and I clocked it at 22 kilometers an hour. There it is, the motor's running in freewheel at the moment. As you can see, the rear wheel's running quite nicely. Now, if I'm running and I pull in one of the brakes, you can hear that the motor has cut power. I'm pulling in the front brake, but the motor has stopped running. And then if I release the brake, the motor starts up again. I won't pull on the back brake because the cables are getting pinched by the clamp here, and it doesn't work properly. It doesn't release properly when I do that. Now, how much power it actually has got when you're using it, I have no idea. There's only one way to find that out, and that's not going to happen until I get this battery box completed. So join me next week when I'll be finishing this bike and hopefully giving it a test run. If you've enjoyed this video, please remember to like it. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my website www.CNCnutz.com. In the meantime, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch us later. Cheers! Tour de France, here I come.